Are you familiar with Srimad Bhagavatam at all? A little bit? More than a little bit? Huh?
Yes.
Do I need to do some background?
I know.
You're good. Okay. Well, this is class number 13 out of 13. And since I've been here for this visit in the evenings, we've been discussing word. The word overview is what at least I'm used to seeing as overview, but this is using the word flow. In other words, it's not obviously the details, but it's catching the flow of the first 6 cantos. And yesterday evening, we had a bit of a marathon, completing the Vedic cosmology section. Did you see that? No? Cosmology. 5th canto describing the structure of the universe. It's very involved, fascinating, and hard to understand. But we completed 5th canto, and we're doing now a summary of Canto 6. 19 chapters in 1 hour. It was just luck. The 6th canto is showing from this painting here 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. 12 cantos, and the 6th canto represents the chest of the Lord. That is to say, each of the cantos are parts of the form, the literary form. The name has form, the form has form, and the Bhagavatam has form. That's the chest of the Lord. Prabhupada gave titles to each of the cantos as he was translating. This one he's called Prescribed Duties for Mankind. And that's where it starts, prescribed duties, from the first chapter. Primarily, the topics are covering Poshana. Poshana means protection. How the Lord protects his devotees, even those that go astray. So there's prescribed duties. Those who follow prescribed duties are protected by the Lord. And even those that don't, sometimes they transgress the prescribed duties inadvertently, and they're also protected. That's kind of like a simple view of the whole canto. Now, the first 3 chapters of Canto 1 are centered around the Ajamila story. Notice in the upper left, that's the Yamadutas coming to get Ajamila, and he's calling out, Narayana, 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 very loudly. That's the first chapter. So the compassionate Parikshit asks Shukadev how the suffering living entities who fall to the hellish worlds can be delivered. The reason for asking that in the beginning of...
PPT is not showing for live audience. You just need to tweak it.
Okay, fix it. Okay, very good. So I'll just continue. At the very, very end of Canto 5, the Vedic cosmology, is a description of the hellish planets. The Maharaj Parikshit is a king, a very qualified king, so he's concerned about people who are suffering. And the suffering in the hellish planets is really bad suffering. So he wants to know what can be done to prevent people from having to suffer in the hellish planets for their sinful activities. That's a basic, what differentiates theologies. One of the things that makes differentiation between theologies is the answer to that question. What are you to do? Because unavoidably there's going to be some, even unintentional or otherwise, sin, and people will have to suffer. So what can be done to prevent people from suffering the consequence of sin? Think about it, and different theologies address it different ways. So this is the Bhagavatam question on that topic. Shukadeva Goswami replies that the potency of Ajamila's chanting of the holy name of the Lord at the time of death neutralized his sins. Such chanting fully protects a devotee from the agents of Yamaraj. So in these 3 chapters, we have the Bhagavad theology of the chanting of the holy name. It's very important for us. Very important for anyone who is in the age of Kali, and we're certainly in the age of Kali. So here's the question: how may humanity be saved from entering hell? This is I don't think it's a photograph. I think it's a painting of an elephant after taking a bath, throwing dust all over his body. So that's likened to doing sinful activities, atoning for the sinful activities, and then doing the sinful activities again. So Shukadeva Goswami answers his question, what can be done? Perform atonement for one's sins. One will not enter hell after death. That's his answer. And Maharaj Parikshit says, wait a minute, even if you atone for the sin, sinful propensity will remain. So it says here, atonement is useless or it's insufficient because it doesn't take away the tendency to do the sin again. Now, the next answer that Shukadeva Goswami gives was, he appreciates the answer and says, knowledge. If you have knowledge, you'll be less inclined to do that which is sinful. So atonement plus knowledge. And that's not adequate either, because people that have knowledge still do sinful things. So then he offers devotional service. So essentially, karma kanda, jnana kanda, devotional service. My dear king, if a sinful person engages in the service of a bona fide devotee of the Lord, and thus learns how to dedicate his life unto the lotus feet of Krishna, he can be completely purified, meaning even of the tendency. One cannot be purified merely by undergoing austerity, penance, brahmacharya, and the other methods of atonement I have previously described. Prabhupada calls these high-grade activities, and high-grade activities are high-grade activities, but they're not sufficient because it doesn't take away tendency. So then there's this nice verse, Niharam iva bhaskaram, just as the sun immediately dissipates fog. It's a nice photograph of fog or in the early morning, and the sun dissipates. Keshit kevalaya bhaktya vasudeva parayana. Agham Dvanvanti Karchneya Niharam Eva Bhaskaram. If you remember from Canto 4, Canto 4. Canto 4. Yeah. Where my mind is drawing a blank. Narayana Parayana. King Citraketu. No, that comes at the end of this. It comes at the end of this canto. It comes at the end of this canto, where King Citraketu remains undisturbed. Even he's cursed to become a demon. And Lord Shiva says to Parvati, just see. Here it's Vasudeva Parayana, but this in the canto, it's the same language. Narayana Parayana. So Narayana Parayana, or Vasudeva Parayana, unalloyed devotional service. Kechit Kevalaya Bhaktya Vasudeva Parayana Agham Sin Dhunvanti Kartsneya Niharam Eva Bhaskaram. Only a rare person who has adopted complete unalloyed devotional service to Krishna can uproot the weeds of sinful actions. Uproot the weeds of sinful actions, because that's the root. The root causes more. So uproot the weeds of sinful actions with no possibility that they will revive. He can do this simply by discharging devotional service, just as the sun can immediately dissipate fog by its rays. So this is an answer to the question about what can be done to prevent people from having to experience reactions to their sins in the hellish planets. The end of Canto 5. You with me? Okay. So this is the springboard that develops the rest of the first 3 chapters, and for that matter, the canto. Kevalaya Bhaktya, absolute devotion, unalloyed devotion. Vasudeva Parayana. So the real atonement is real knowledge. The real atonement is you leave behind the wrongdoings, and it's fortified by real knowledge, but real atonement and real knowledge is bhakti. Right? And it leads one to being reunited with Krishna. That's Gopal Kumar in a close-up. Very beautiful painting. So to support this statement, Shukadeva Goswami tells a history. At the end of the history, he says where he heard the history. And it's not from Vyasadeva, explaining it in his Srimad Bhagavatam class. Ajamila was a resident of Kanyakubja, modern-day Kanauj. That's in UP, right? Yeah? Kanyakubja? Huh? Madhya?
I think Madhya Pradesh probably.
Madhya Pradesh probably, I think. I think it's near Lucknow, which is Kanauj. I'm not sure. Could you, Balaram Prasad, could you just check on your, Google Guru and see where Kanauj is, which state of India it is? So it's a little history. Huh?
You're correct. UP.
Kanauj. Sometimes I'm right. So he was a Brahmin boy trained up very nicely by his father. He studied the Vedas. He followed all the Brahmana principles. He was married. He had a dowry. He was all set up. He was a nice young Brahmana married man. But because of his past, this youthful Brahmana was somehow attracted by a prostitute. He became most fallen and abandoned everything from his Brahminical practices. The scene that's described is he was once gathering items from the forest for a yajna. When he was there, he saw what you see over there, a prostitute and a drunken man going at it. And he had never seen anything like that before, and he was absorbed. When he went back to his home, he tried to get his mind purified by his chanting of mantras and doing his pujas and all the Brahminical things that he knew. However, his mind had already become attached. So here's a nice little chart showing the sequence. He saw some illicit affair, lust was awakened, his mind became illusioned, he tried to control the senses, he tried to remember the scriptures, didn't work. His senses, his mind kept going and going and going. Cupid's arrow struck, he lost his good sense, he went and started hanging out with the prostitute. And then he started bringing the prostitute to his home with his wife. And he gave up Dharma altogether. He wasted his wealth. He gave up his wife. He over-endeavored to maintain, because now he's a Brahmana. What's he going to do to maintain his family? He has to turn to criminal activities. So transgressing scriptures, became old and very, very attached. So here's a BBT painting that shows there the contemplation, attachment, lust, and so forth and so on. And the end doesn't look very nice. While contemplating the objects of the senses. This is a BBT attempt to illustrate that verse. And contemplating objects has that sequence. So, all of its good qualities were gone, and he committed sins to maintain his family. He lived for 88 years with this prostitute, and with the prostitute he had 10 sons. The youngest of his 10 sons, little Narayana. And as he was getting older and doing all the sinful things, he didn't couldn't understand the soon approaching event of death. When death came, he panicked, and he started thinking of where his attachment was. In this case, his youngest son, Narayana. Very loudly he called out, Narayana, Narayana, Narayana. And by that calling, the agents of Narayana came. But before they came, there's many illustrations here. That's a very interesting one. That's just one Yamaduta. It says there were 3, and frightful-looking Yamadutas came with their subtle ropes to take his subtle body from his gross body and take that subtle body before the court of Yamaraj for judgment. And you see he's got ropes, and the ropes are being tied around his neck. But there's his little boy, Narayana, coming to the rescue, but not going to work. See, here's the 3 Yamadutas. One of them looks like a skeleton, but certainly very fearful looking. And when he called, so there's the subtle body being taken from the gross body, being pulled by the ropes. And the Vishnu Dutas, 3 4-armed features, came. This is the BBT painting of the same. And it does say 3, but there's 4. of those Yamadutas, and the Vishnudutas came. And poor Ajamila, he looks pretty scared. And you see those subtle ropes in their hands, taking his subtle body. There's a diorama, a photograph of a diorama. I guess it's supposed to be fire in the background, hellfire or something like that. His gross body, his subtle body being pulled by subtle ropes. They do look fierce. And the Vishnudutas to the rescue. Another one. This is the last one. I don't know exactly why the lady in the bird cage is just taking care of the bird cage without taking care of the bird, I guess. That example. So he calls Narayana. And when he called Narayana, the Vishnudutas appear. And the Yamadutas are being stopped. And the Yamadutas aren't used to being stopped. Who stops death? So they ask some questions. Who are you to challenge the jurisdiction of Yamaraj? As far as they're concerned, he's it. He's the Lord of Death. There isn't anybody higher than Yamaraj. So who are you? Why are you forbidding us? Where are you from? Who is your master? Your forms look proper. Why you're acting improperly? Good questions. And the Vishnudutas say, before we answer all your questions, you please answer our questions. What's the meaning of Dharma? What's the symptoms of adharma? What's the proper process of punishing? And who are candidates fit and unfit for punishment? Good questions. And then they give a series of answers, but the essence, this man Ajamila did not undergo atonement. Therefore, because of his sinful life, we must take him to the presence of Yamaraj for punishment. There, according to the extent of his sinful acts, he will be punished and thus purified. So that's the end of chapter 1. So the theology of the holy name hasn't been presented yet, other than saying, just by calling, even unintentionally, by calling the names of Narayana, calling the names of the Lord, even unintentionally, there's great benefit. And we're going to hear the great benefit. So the Vishnudutas, another painting, they chastise the Yamadutas, saying, you're representing Yamaraj, and he's the Dharmaraj is Yamaraj, and you're supposed to know Dharma, but you're speaking adharma in Dharma's place. Why? Because you say he didn't atone, but he chanted the holy name. And the chanting of the holy name has such glory that in itself is sufficient to extinguish all sinful reactions for so many deeds, not just what he did in his life, but many, many lifetimes, just once. You don't know this theology? And you better go back and speak to Yamaraj and do your homework. You get an F in your exam. So they literally released Ajamila. Yamadutas went back and said to Yamaraj, hey, what's going on? Are there two lords? Oh, we thought you were the Lord. And if there's two lords, that's going to be problematic, because supposing they don't agree. So if you feel that we're qualified, please tell us. And he says many nice things, including that celebrated verse of the 12 Mahajans, saying it's not easy to understand Dharma, but the 12 Mahajans have it. They have it, and he's one of them. So Ajamila was hearing this Bhagavatam class very attentively, and discussing the theology of Dharma and Adharma and Paradharma. And so he wanted to say something to the Vishnu Dutas, but they knew that, and so they just, poof, they just disappeared. Now he's alone, lying in bed, catching his breath, and he's getting some realizations about the nature of religious principles and transcendental religious principles, the glories of the holy name, and how fallen he had become. So he becomes very repentant. And then he starts making decisions what to do. This is a nice chart. The one devotee that has discussed the whole overview of the Bhagavatam. So I don't know if I'm going to read it all because of time. But it's both negative and positive. He's going to give up bad stuff and he's going to take good stuff. I like this one at the bottom right. It's be merciful, well-wishing friend to all. No more bodily identification, etc. So he makes up his mind. He's going to go to a temple, a Vishnu temple. He goes to Haridwar and takes shelter, supposing it's one of those temples over there or something. And he just dedicated himself in unalloyed devotional service to Vishnu. He's been freed from these material conceptions of what is happiness and so forth. And by practicing devotional practices with great focus, because he had the capacity, his mind and senses became controlled, and after some time, absorbed in thinking of the Lord's form, the Vishnu Dutas come again, this time in a Vimana. And they say, let's go. We're taking you back to the spiritual world. And he's very happy. He gets on the Vaikuntha Vimana, and his spiritual form becomes manifest. That's a nice description in this section. And he returns to Vaikuntha. So after narrating the story, which Sukadeva Goswami narrated to illustrate that particular point, Kechit Kevalaya Bhaktya Vasudeva Prayana, now he's going to further elaborate on the glories of the holy name. So we're not covering everything, but this is just an overview. He speaks of the importance of inattentive, non-offensive chanting. Of course, what Ajamila did was not pure chanting, but it wasn't offensive chanting. It was abhas chanting. It's all discussed in that section. Very, very good section to become familiar with the glories of the holy name and how to chant properly. So here's, again, this nice devotee that's done the overview. Ajamila chanted without faith. What happens if you chant with faith? He chanted while dying. What will happen if one chants while living? He chanted to indicate his son. What happens if one chants to indicate the Lord? He was most sinful. What will happen if a sinless person chants? So it's a contrast, all of these. So that's the first 3 chapters. And then the next 3 chapters goes back to some history that connected with Canto 5, which connected with history from Canto 4 and Canto 3, for that matter. Descendants of Manu and the lineages of kings from Uttanapada, and then his lineage, and then Priyavrata and his lineage, Prithu, and so forth. So now we're at Prajapati Daksha. Prajapati Daksha curses Narada Muni for convincing his thousands of sons to take sannyas. However, Daksha is pleased with 60 daughters who eventually fulfill his desire to fill the universe with living entities. So we're still in the earlier stages of the universe. The first Manu, that is to say. Okay, so that's this quick summary. This is how the chapter begins. Maharaj Parikshit speaking. My dear Lord, the demigods, demons, human beings, nagas, beast, birds were created during the reign of Swayambhuva Manu. You've spoken about this briefly, third canto. Can you go into it a little more deeply? I wish to know about it elaborately. And the potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by which he brought about the secondary creation. So here we are in Canto 6, and it's still Sarga and Visarga. You know the meaning? Sarga and Visarga. Okay. Sarga is what Vishnu does, and Visarga is what Brahma does. It has to do with creation. Vishnu's part and Brahma's part. The secondary creation is Visarga, it's what Brahma does. And there's a potency with which Brahma does what Brahma does, creative potency. Shrishti Shakti, creative potency. So he wants to hear more about that. I wish to know about the potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by which he brought about the secondary creation. And he wants to know this lineage more. You know, all these different demigods, demons, human beings, nagas, beasts, and birds, how did they come into being? And it wasn't, you know, Darwinian evolution. That's not the answer he's going to get. So, Daksha. Does anybody remember? Daksha part 2. Who was he the son of? Who were his parents? Daksha part 1 was, had his head chopped by Virabhadra. And then he was given a goat's head. Then later he died. Later on, much time later, he was born the son of whom? I can't remember right now. Can you remember? No. No. Huh?
One of the Manus.
No. Well, I'll find out before we end here this evening. So he's born, and he still has this Prajapati Bhav. He wants to produce Praja that fills up the universe. And population was growing, but it wasn't done very nicely, so he went to the Vindhya mountains, performed austerities, and part of those austerities were chanting, as you see across the top, the Hansagoya prayers. The Hansagoya prayers glorify Lord Vishnu in various ways, but the Supreme Controller. So Vishnu appeared, much to Daksha's amazement. And Daksha offers prayers, Vishnu offers benedictions and instructions. Your life is successful because of your austerities, devotion, and faith in me. Brahma, Shiva, the Manus, demigods, and you Prajapatis are working for everyone's welfare by increasing the population, except Ashikni, the daughter of Prajapati Panjajana, as your wife, and begat hundreds of children in her womb. So he chanted the Hansagoya prayers because he wanted a better effect in his Prajapati program, his service. And sure enough, Asikni was very capable as a daughter of a Prajapati. Together, their combination produced 10,000 sons. Pretty intense. And there's Daksha instructing them, please assist me, now you're mature young men. Before you marry, I want you to assist me in helping to fill the universe with good praja. And so their answer is, yes, sir. And they go off to Narayana Saras. It's a place where the Saraswati River flows into the sea, where many sages go and look at all those 10,000 young brahmacharis lined up with their shaved heads all around the river, Saraswati River. And Narayana didn't have a PA system, but he was asking them he asked them a kind of a riddle to see if they could solve the riddle, and they solved the riddle. So he kind of understood these men are very smart. And he then advised them, you're qualified to be renounced young men. You can join my bhakti program and my ashram. And Narada then went back to Daksha and told him the good news. Your sons joined my bhakti program. And Daksha wasn't happy. So then with his Ashikni wife, he produced next 1,000 sons. And the 1,000 sons followed the path. He said, watch out for Narada. Go do your austerities, but watch out for his bhakti program. And so Narada instructs them, and he just said, your brothers are very smart, just follow your brothers. And so they said, yes, sir. And they joined his ashram too. So then Narada went back to inform Daksha the good news. I mean, he knew how he was going to respond. But, Narada's really, as you see, he's really expert. These are previous cantos. He's really expert at delivering people the message of Shuddha Bhakti. And, he tests, he examines people before he gives Shuddha Bhakti. But he's a very capable preacher. Very, 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 very expert. So when he goes back to inform Daksha, sure enough, Daksha criticizes. He said, I'm a grihavrata, I'm a householder, you're a sannyasi. But, I've done this yagya, that yagya, the other yagya, so many yagyas. And, I'm a really qualified person, look at you. You're a disgrace. So, I curse you. You won't be able to stay in one place. You'll have to keep traveling all the time, no residence. And Narada said, Haribol. Life of sannyas, fantastic. It doesn't say what happened after that between the two, but then he still has his qualified wife, and the qualified wife next produced 60 daughters. These 60 daughters were all then given as queens or wives to the great sages who were to assist in the Prajapati service. And so many of the daughters to this sage, and so many of the daughters to that sage, and so on. And they miraculously, somehow or another, produced all these different species by their combination with the Prajapatis. Human beings, demigods, demons, beasts, birds, and serpents. Like Kayadu. Kayadu? Not Kayadu. I forget her name. Anyway, who's the mother of Garuda? Starts with a K.
Kadru.
Kadru. Thank you. Kadru. So that was one of his daughters, and from Kadru, birds. And then another serpents, and so on. Aditi gave birth to demigods. So there's a whole range of filling up the universe. That's the Prajapati service that Daksha was instrumental in assisting. But meanwhile, he's insulted Narada. Okay, that's chapters 4 through 6. Remember, we're going to chapter 19. So next comes Vrtrasura story. He appeared in the family of demons, because we heard some of the different persons that were created, and it's a little intricate. Yeah, a little intricate. Appeared in a family of demons, not exactly, appeared from a fire, but anyway, is actually a great devotee of the Lord. At one point, Indra is ashamed to fight with him. Vrtrasura convinces Indra to do his duty by fighting. When Indra kills Vrtrasura, let me just go to the story. Here's how chapter 7 begins. There's a big festival at Indraloka. There's Indra over there on the left on his throne. The apsaras are singing and are dancing, and the Gandharvas are singing, and there's a big party, and it's a, all glories to Indra party in Indraloka. And while the party's going on, the spiritual master of the demigods, Prajapati, pictured over here on the right, comes in, and Indra just doesn't pay any attention to him at all. He's too much filled with himself. So Prajapati understands his mood and his attitude. He doesn't say anything. He just turns and leaves. And he doesn't just leave the palace here. He leaves the heavenly realm. They can't find him. Later in the evening, his good wife, Sati, says, "Do you know what had happened? He didn't pay any attention to Prajapati, and he just left." And it was, uh-oh. So he sent people searching, he himself went searching, couldn't find Prajapati anywhere. Indra feels really badly, he laments and he regrets. And there were no text messages and social media at that time, but news spread fast. I went to the Sukracharya. He heard Prajapati left the demigods. Now is your chance. Get your weapons, because their strength comes from their spiritual master, and he's very, very, very powerful. So they got their weapons. There's a big battle, and the demons won. The demigods lost. The demigods went to Brahma. Brahma chastises Indra. You did it again, Indra. When are you going to learn? And he gives some instruction. Your offense is due to your impudence and pride because of your material opulence. And by the result of that, your neglect of Vrtrasura, you became weak. He left, that's your strength. You were defeated by the demons who are weak. The demons gained their strength by worshiping their spiritual master. Although he's Shukracharya, it doesn't have the capacity of Prajapati, but they are very faithful and fixed in this way. One gets that strength by faith and worship of Brahmanas, cows, and Lord Govinda. So here's what you should do. So that was the chastisement and the explanation of why it happened. Now here's what to do. What to do is go to Vishwarup, who is the son of Twashta. He's very, very capable, and he will help you. He'll fulfill your desire. Now, it says specifically here that he had an inclination to demons. No. Twashta is a very elevated Brahmana, very powerful Brahmana, and he married a wife who was from the Daitya family, or Daitya dynasty. So Vishwarup was their son, and as you see, here's Vishwarup on the right. He has 3 heads. Indicated later in the chapter, he has 1 head for chanting mantras, 1 head for drinking water, and 1 head for taking soma juice, soma rasa. He was like a really capable person, so he could do 3 things at one time. You go to him, but Vishwarup had an affection for his mother. So Vishwarup, there's this nice discussion. Indra petitions him, please help us. And he gives reasons why it's not a good idea, but he finally accepts. The interesting, it's not a good idea, it's very interesting. But he accepts. And one of the ways that he accepts, he says, if I'm going to do this rituals for you, karmakanda rituals, then there is some dakshin that goes to the brahmana who performs the ritual. And I may become materialistic by thinking, oh, you're demigods, and they'll give me nice dakshin. So what I'll do instead is, you give the dakshin, but I'll just use this for worshiping the deity. I won't use it for anything for myself. And that way I'll be freed from contamination. Very smart. So he agreed, and he taught Indra. There's a whole chapter on Narayana Kavacha, or Kavacha means shield. Kavacha means shield. So it's a mantra by touching different parts of the body, saying a mantra like, Om Keshavaya Namaha. It's more elaborate, but it's touching the body, sanctifying the body, saying names of the Lord, and he then protects the body. Narayana Kavacha, that's what it is. May this form of the Lord protect this part of the body, that, so forth. So he gave them the Narayana Kavacha, and he chanted the verses. He says, one who chants the verses of Narayana Kavacha to the 8-armed Vishnu sitting on the shoulders of Garuda, and whoever chants this prayer is never disturbed or put in danger by government, plunderers, by evil demons, or by any types of disease. So he sanctifies himself. Indra puts on this Narayana Kavacha armor, and off he goes to battle. And the demons are defeated. And he's saying, wow, this Vishrup is good. So, the next lesson is Indra kills Vishrup. And why did Indra kill Vishrup? I think this section is mixed up. Vishrup, in addition to offering oblations in the fire, sacrificial fire, for the benefit of the demigods, he snuck in some mantras, oblations to the demons, in favor of his mother. And the demigods were happy because they were getting oblations, but when they figured out, wait a minute, he's saying oblations for the demigods too, Indra became angry and chopped his head. So Indra had to undergo some atonement for that. When Indra discovers that Vishrupa is secretly worshipping by offering sacrificial oblations to the relatives of his mother, who are demons, Indra beheads him. 3 heads. Vishrup's father, that's what's in the picture down there, that's Twashta, he doesn't like this at all. So he does a yajna from the Vedas to get a son that will kill Indra. But he mispronounces the mantra. So he got the demon that would be killed by Indra. Something like Indra Chatro and instead of Indra Chatroho. A demon that will be killed by Indra. So this big fiery demon, Vrtrasura, arose. It looks pretty scary. The description is there of what he looked like. His red beard and his eyes and his hair and big trident and roaring and everything. So with his Narayana Kavacha, there's the big battle between the demigods and the demons. Another battle picture, demigods fighting the demons. Here's Vrtrasura fighting with Indra. And there's Vrtrasura. Look how big he is. You can't see so well in this the way the painting is cropped, but where his feet are, he's stepping on hundreds of soldiers. That's how big his body is. They're crushed. Then Indra comes out, throws his mace, and like his little pinky, he grabs the mace and takes the mace and bonks Airavata in the forehead with his mace. You see blood coming out of his mouth. And Airavata falls back. And Indra is just, with his thunderbolt in his hand, just stunned. So Vrtrasura gives him a Bhagavatam class. First he says, you know, you're going to get it. And then he says, you're favored by the personality of Godhead. So, let me have it. Let's do battle. This next painting is showing the demigods approaching Lord Vishnu at the shore of the Milk Ocean. I think I've got this sequence mixed up. This is the demigods approaching whom? That's not certainly Lord Vishnu. Who's this? Yeah, to get a special. Okay, this is Indra approaching Dadichi, and he gives them a method by which they can. Okay, Vishnu says, "Go to Dadichi. He'll fix your problem. Ask him for his bones." And Vishwakarma can fashion a thunderbolt from his bones, and you'll defeat Vishwarup. So Dadichi gives his bones. He speaks transcendental things to them, gives up his body right on the spot. They take the bones. Vishwarup makes a thunderbolt weapon, and there's the thunderbolt weapon being shot at Vishwarup. And there's, he cuts his arms off, and then Vishwarup speaks, you know, send me back to the spiritual world. I'm ready. You know, don't hesitate. Because he speaks such transcendental knowledge, Indra's going, uh-oh, he's not just a worldly guy. So he convinces him, send me back to Godhead. You get what you want, I'll get what I want. You want your kingdom back? You get your kingdom back. And I want to go to our Lord. Then he starts speaking, goes really into this high state of consciousness of our Lord, and speaks of the Lord in his form, in his spiritual world, and I'm ready. You know, just right there, it's cut off my head. Use your thunderbolt. This is, Lord Vishnu has already given you this benediction. Please do it. And so he does it. And he feels badly. He has to go hide to somewhere it shows this. He hides in a lake inside a lotus stem because death personified chases him. He goes here and there and hides, does austerities for 1,000 years. That's Vrtrasura. So here's the final chapter. Vrtrasura's, who was Shukadev Goswami is asked, wow, how did Vrtrasura get to be such an elevated person? He was the topmost position of a Vaishnava. How did that happen? So this is how it happened. And that's the end of the chapter. So we discussed this with the Chinese devotees just this morning. I don't know if did you see that class? No. The Citraketu story. From his previous birth, Vrtrasura was a great king, Citraketu. And a long story. But it goes like this. Citraketu, quickly. Citraketu was a king where everything was nice except he had no son. He married multiple queens to have a son, no son. 10 million queens. He surpassed what Krishna did. No son. 2 plus 2 equals what? But he couldn't do the math. He was too attached. Like it's not meant to happen. So Angira Muni visited, I want a son to help me. So he saw, I can't preach to this man, he's too attached. So he gave him, performed a yagya, by which some payasam was produced. Give it to your queen, she'll have a son. But the son will be both a source of happiness and distress. Call him Harsha Shoka. So the son was born. The envious co-queens, co-wives, poisoned the son. He died. And there was a whole exchange of Angira and Narada visiting at that point, giving transcendental knowledge, giving knowledge of devotional service. So many things. Citraketu gets it. He goes to the mountainside, performs meditation and chanting of mantra, and perfects his spiritual life. In his self-same body, goes to Vidyadhara Loka, becomes a king in Vidyadhara Loka. In his mystic powers, he becomes a dear friend of Lord Shiva. He goes to visit Lord Shiva. Parvati mistakes his words of glorifying Shiva as criticism. She cursed him to become a demon. And he gets down from his vimana, stands before Parvati, says beautiful words to Parvati. I've been misunderstood, but that's okay. This is the will of Providence. And I'm not to blame and you're not to blame, but really, please forgive me for the words that I said that made you think that I was criticizing Lord Shiva. He is the most exalted of all Vaishnavas. And then Lord Shiva says this Narayana Parayana verse. To see the exalted nature. It's not that he made the offense, you made the offense. Because he's such an exalted personality. He's fixed in the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, whom I worship, and all of us qualified souls worship. He's to him, Svarga, Apavarga, Narakeshu, Apitulyarta Darshanam. He sees equally any one of those three. Svarga, or liberation, or hell. Seems the same. Undisturbed. So that's this. Citraketu shows his great devotion for Sankarshan. Citraketu was cursed by Parvati to become an asura. In his next life, by humbly accepting the curse, he reveals a pure devotee's tolerance of everything that happens to him as the Lord's mercy, whether he goes to heaven or hell. So that's a real fast-forward version of the Citraketu story. And now, normally, I've given a seminar on Canto 6, and it takes about 13 sessions. Because it's a lot. So we just did a really overview, simple version. Very simple. But one of the most valuable sections is the Theology of the Holy Name section in the beginning. First 3 chapters. And the tendency of pride, if someone is good at material activities, as Daksha was, as he cursed Shiva, he cursed, in his next lifetime, cursed Narada. He's really messing around, Daksha. But Narada delivered all his sons, and then the daughters became wives of Prajapatis and populated the universe in different species. That was one of his questions. How that happened is mentioned in Canto 2. Please elaborate. So there's not, the Bhagavatam is not, all of the, there's a distinction between itihasas and Puranas. Itihasas are chronological and Puranas are not. They're histories. Like, think of the Ramayana, from beginning to end. It's all chronological. And think of the Bhagavatam, it's not at all chronological. Something's in the first canto is spoken of again in the third canto. Something in the second canto, spoken again in the sixth canto. Something in the fifth canto, sons of Rishabdev, spoken of in the 11th canto. So it's logical, but not chronological. And sequentially, one who hears it and becomes absorbed in it, like these Srimad Bhagavatam reading groups are doing, they're just going to get filled with thoughts of Krishna. Whether, reading it, discussing it, asking about it, it's that kind of subject matter that lifts one's consciousness into transcendence. Any way you go at it. In the years of ISKCON, when Prabhupada was first coming out with these Bhagavatam volumes, we couldn't keep up with it. But so our book distributors remember this very clearly. Third Canto Part 2, then come Third Canto Part 3, and you hand somebody Third Canto Part 4, and they look at you like, what happened to the other parts? And Prabhupada said, here's how you answer. You say, if you lick on an ice cream from any side, it's sweet. It worked. And it's true. They weren't lying. One devotee in China shared with me, one of our translators shared with me that when she goes to work, she takes mantra cards and tries to get people to say the mantra. So one person asked her what the mantra was, what the meaning. She didn't know what to say. So she said something. She said it teaches one how to become full in 6 opulences, or something like that. It teaches about the 6 opulences. It's a mantra about the 6 opulences. So, I want to be opulent. How's that mantra go again? So it's not it. However, she sent me another photograph in a beauty salon. So she wanted to get them in the beauty salon to say the mantra. So she said, but you have to be really careful because it's kind of a tongue twister. So they stood in a row, the ladies on this side, the men on this side, to show the little video. And she said, and they repeated the mantra twice. Just beginning their spiritual life with this faith that the sound of the holy name, like the Vishnu Dutas say, have the potency to eradicate all sins. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to stop after saying one mantra or 2 mantras. Tendency will remain and behaviors will follow tendency. But it's a beginning. A very powerful mantra. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion on all of this. Or anything off topic that you want, because I'm fatigued at the end of this. Class 13. Shatarupa had a hard time waking up this morning. She's exhausted. But you can think, you can take rest, and I'm going to the next place where I'll be exercised like this in the next place. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. It was really wonderful. I was following the series. I missed a couple of the lectures.
They're all recorded.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and
Okay,
listen to
fine.
them. However, this particular one, there were 4 sections. I have a question in 3 of those sections. If it's okay, I'll ask you those questions. So, when it comes to the Ajamil section,
When it comes to what?
Ajamil story, the first 3 chapters, I actually started thinking about Arjuna in the battlefield when he starts feeling, he was losing his composure and, his mind went completely out of control. Krishna was there, he spoke to him, he brought him back into the battle. However, in Ajamil's case, it was not really his fault that he saw what he saw, but that impression stuck in him.
Oh,
So I'm wondering why, in spite of all the things that he did, why was it that he could not fight it, or what could he have done to, stop that taking over from him? Because it was like a cascade. Once it hit him, he didn't know how to stop it. How do we stop something like that if it comes to us?
supposing somebody doesn't. Because the lesson, while contemplating the object of the senses, etc., the domino thing, it's right in Bhagavad Gita. So it's the cascade effect or the domino effect is best checked at the earliest. As soon as you detect, you stop it. Now, what he took shelter of was reading scripture and doing his yagyas and doing his pujas and things. Now, it wasn't wrong, but it wasn't sufficient because his mind wasn't letting go. So the answer to your question is, if your mind doesn't let go, it will continue. So how to control the mind when it doesn't want to let go is your question. You have to have a mind that's stronger than the tendency to continue to follow that flow. So you may need association of someone who can, bonk you on the side of the head and get you back in the middle of the road when you're heading for the ditch. It's like somebody that's, drowsing when driving. You have somebody next to you, spray bottle or, something. Somebody that can check your tendency, strength beyond your own strength. And knowing that that's a possibility, build your strength when you're not in the midst of, the cascade effect. You can draw upon spiritual strength that way.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Then coming to the next section, Prajapati Daksha. So it's interesting. The Prajapatis have been requested to produce offsprings to populate the worlds or the universe, which is a service that they're supposed to do for the Lord.
Yeah.
And now, in conflict, Narada comes and starts converting them and stopping the population of the world.
But no.
So,
What you're rendering is what Daksha was thinking, but there's another rendering. He first examined them. When he saw that they were qualified to not become involved in those activities, they're suited. Better is the path of nivritti than the path of pravriti. With the daughters, he didn't go to the daughters and say, are you ready for the path of nivritti? They became queens or wives and produced praja. So the service was consummated with the right people. And those that are suited for renunciation, they should go that path.
Wonderful, Maharaj. Thank you so much for that. And one final one. Citraketu had 10 million wives.
Yeah, that's too many.
Yeah. You know, how I mean, how did he manage to maintain relationships?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, Guru Maharaj. Just blew
You're
my
asking a
mind up.
sannyasi, come on. Obviously, he didn't do such a great job because they poisoned his son. They weren't satisfied. Now, you're bringing up some questions like this reminds me of a question that was asked when we were discussing Canto 4 about Prithu. Someone asked, whoever the person is that asked this question, I hope you're listening, is there an etymological connection between Prithu and Mother Earth, whose name is Prithvi? Prithu and Prithvi. Sounds like it comes the same root. So I asked a Sanskrit scholar, and he was very clear. He gave me the extended Monier-Williams dictionary definition of Prithu. Here's what the Prithu says. Large, great, important, abundant, broad, wide, expansive, extensive, spacious, ample. That's the meaning of Prithu. And in the same dictionary, it says that Prithvi is derived from Prithu. And there isn't a direct meaning of Prithvi, or Prithivi is another way of spelling. Prithvi or Prithivi is the feminine form of Prithu. And so the Sanskrit scholar says it means something like the white earth. Derived from the feminine form of Prithu is Prithvi. So that's an answer to that question, because I had to ask somebody that knew. And he consulted his dictionary. Okay.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Let's do our little ritual here.
Maharaj, Ajamila, he unintentionally chanted the Lord's name during his time of death, but he still qualified to go back to Godhead.
No. He qualified to become freed from the reactions of his sins. He had to go further. And he did.
So when it comes to people in the mixed stage where they intentionally chant the holy name to be freed from their sins, but
That's offense. He didn't do that. He didn't intentionally chant the name to become free from his sins. He chanted his son's name. So it wasn't offense, it wasn't shuddha, it wasn't aparad. It was abhas. Middle. You understand the difference?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if somebody chants the holy name to go back to Godhead, but at the same time, if they unintentionally make any offenses or sins in the way, will they have to account for those sins?
The key word is unintentional. Intentional is something else. Unintentional is something else. Okay?
Yeah.
Your mother.
Guru Maharaj, I had a similar question of what Vachaspati asked. I have gifted the Second Chance book to a couple of our relatives few years back. So their question was, after reading the book, so Ajamila, how he called the name of Narayana without having any bhakti or something, but still.
The answer is, I don't think you had the power button on, but I heard what you said. It's okay. I'm just, for the next person. what our acharyas say, what Prabhupada says, is because of his previous practices, brahmana and devotional practices, Supersoul inspired him to name his son Narayana. Because Supersoul inspired him to name his name Narayana, when death came, knowing that he would be attached to his son, he called his son, because that's who he was attached to. And that was sufficient for purifying him and bringing the Vishnu Dutas to his rescue. Okay.
So their question is, why to take a lot of austerities, taking up this devotional process rather?
It didn't go to zero. He got distracted. He got big time covered, but it didn't go to zero. It just got covered. And kindness of Super Soul, it got revived. Name your son Narayan. Oh, Narayan. Does that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, may I have
Yeah, sure.
one more question? So a few years back, you gave us few beautiful meditative verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, which we recite every day.
Oh.
So my mother, when she asked, when I share with her, this is what I meditate every day, but I'm not meditating every day with the translation. For me, how should I know the meaning, but when I do it on a daily basis, I'm not able to meditate on the meaning every time I recite those verses. How to do that? But at the same time, her question is, when I give with the translation, their intention is not to recite or even read the translation. They wanted only the Sanskrit verse. So will they have the same effect, or?
Well, it depends. That's the second question first. Depends. It depends on their consciousness. There's purification even if you don't understand the meaning, but the fullness is you understand the meaning. And how does that meaning become revealed? Well, you can meditate on the meaning. That's what Hari Bhakti Vilas, that's what our acharyas recommend. You meditate on the meaning. But supposing you don't, your question is, will they get the same benefit? It depends. The meaning can be revealed to them. The sound vibration is absolute. The meaning can be revealed to them, but maybe not. But are they being purified? Absolutely. That's what spiritually committed persons, not just pious, but spiritually committed persons do. They recite with faith, and they get benefit. Definitely makes them more spiritually qualified. But the full benefit is with an understanding of the meaning. Now, the understanding the meaning, what does that mean? It can just mean the essence of the Lord's being very merciful to his devotee. It can be very simple. I mean, like the illiterate Brahmin in Sri Rangam. It just you are the real scholar of Bhagavad Gita, according to Lord Chaitanya. So the benefit is not the same, but it depends. If the Lord gives them the realization, that's sufficient. Now, the first question is a how-to question. And you know my answer to how-to questions these days. So, part of sadhu sangha is abhyasa yoga yukti. So if I'm mechanical in my recitation, and how do I get out of the mechanical into the devotional, is by continuing to recite and striving for devotion. That's how.
For me, when I recite those verses...
The button's off. Okay, you're on. Okay, go ahead.
When I recite those verses, the Sanskrit verse comes fast in my mind, so I'm able to recite, but I'm not able to really focus on the meaning of that. So it's very difficult for me to do every day.
Okay, keep trying. It's like, our Gayatri mantras. One could be as hearing, and then there's the meaning. And it's a refinement of consciousness that as you're reciting, the meaning is flowing. And, some persons, I don't have that capacity, that you just learn the Sanskrit enough, so you just hear the Sanskrit and the meaning is there. Slowly, slowly, slowly. But, you have to start wherever you are. And if the Sanskrit comes very readily to you, do the Sanskrit. And then, but the meaning of the Sanskrit should come. And one can think of the meaning in terms of Sanskrit instead of, English or Hindi or Telugu or whatever somebody's language is, Gujarati or something. But the meaning should come through in course of time. And how it flows, how it works for you may be different than for another person, or vice versa. Anything?
Thank you, Madam.
I think you answered my question.
Really? You didn't even ask it.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So my question was the same as Prabhuji asked the first question. And I think you answered the question, but I'm still like, how you come out of it, like from the situations where you are involved when it's very difficult to put somebody next to you while you are driving, or not all the time you have someone around you, and it is
Well, situations like becoming enamored, the senses becoming enamored with a sense object, it can happen, rather swiftly, but generally if in the case where it lingers, you do have the opportunity to reach out to some sadhu, and it's not necessarily physical proximity, but it's association. You and each of us should have persons who we open our heart to, and they're munificent souls. They understand us, they're very kind, they have spiritual qualification, and we can open our heart and we allow them to come in, and they come in. And they can give us strength beyond our own strength. It doesn't have to be physical proximity, and it doesn't have to be instantly. I use that example just to say, when you're asleep at the wheel, it's really helpful you have somebody, companion that's not sleeping, because sometimes people drive and the other person's sleeping. And anyway, it's just a comparison to say somebody you've probably been in a car when the driver, you see their eyes are starting to droop, right? You've had that?
yeah.
Yeah. Engage them in conversation, and the drowsiness goes away. You don't have to shake them or squirt them. You can just conversation. So, but it's protection. So sadhu sangha is a kind of protection. It gives strength beyond your own strength. And it doesn't have to be physical proximity, but a heart proximity, a heart openness. And somebody that has actual spiritual credential or spiritual shakti, spiritual qualification. That's, then it's not necessarily instantly, it's suddenly the brake pedal slams and you stop. But it doesn't accelerate. The cascading effect becomes checked.
Thank you, Maharaj.
All right?
Maharaj, you actually answered right. I had the same question as my dad about how to keep your mind under control.
Okay. You have your mind under control now? All right. All right. Balaram.
Maharaj had a couple questions. One was from the Bharat Maharaj story. That one was still bothering me, that at the end of his life he remembered the deer and he became the deer. So the why was the, you actually explained, that's because of the offenses what he has committed earlier, and that came as an anartha in his heart.
Yes.
And that's the one which is bothering him, something like that. So, but now,
That weakened his bhakti to the point where he chose foolishly. The specific point was that Jiva Goswami was making. It's not that the deer manifested because of his bad karma, or some karma, because karma is checked by bhakti. So it's not a karma question, so leave that one to the side. So why did it happen? The choice is there, and he made the wrong choice because of the anartha that was blocking his bhakti. And that the anartha was there because of something in the past. He was a carrying forward of an anartha from the past.
yeah, that's where I'm confused. Anartha is actually blocking bhakti, but when we are practicing bhakti, anartha should go away.
But gradually, they're not quickly.
But he was practicing bhakti, because of that he had lived for 1 crore, that is 10 million years, ruling the country, the whole world. I was just thinking, he was
How
a
much,
devotee.
what about me?
And he was a devotee, that's why Krishna gave him such a long life to lead. And then that happens to him.
That's a, thank you. I also contemplated that. You know, reading what Jiva, later, it was after I read what Jiva Goswami wrote that it came it came, you know, the light went on. How long did he rule? And then this, you know, it's amazing. It's exceptional. And no, besides, how did that happen? You know, with that long duration of very elevated bhakti, how can an artist still remain? So it doesn't. You're familiar with Madhurya Kandamini? No? You've heard the title?
Yes.
There's a chapter, and then in the chapter there's description, and in one of the books, one of the renderings, there's a chart that shows when anarthas are gone. And it's at the prema stage. Anarthas may still, you know, the trace of them may still remain even in the bhava stage, as in the case with. So it's puzzling, but a trace remained, and that's why. And the prema stage gone. So what? So so what is the lesson? You know, besides what's the hope for us? What's the lesson? The lesson is be very careful. Supposing you know somebody has made Vaishnava aparat or some aparat. It's really serious business. It's particularly as far as getting the benefit of bhakti. It's inhibited for that person. So now, what about us? You know, be very careful. And if, you know, let's just assume unintentionally somewhere along the way we've made some offense, and our bhakti gets being blocked by that. So now what? What are we going to do? We continue with our bhakti. What else are you going to do? And it's going to take as long as it takes. And if Krishna is very merciful, he can remove it. So we pray, for example, to Lord Nrsingadev, please take these things. That's one of our prayers. For any offenses we may have made, please remove this offense. That's the function of worship of Lord Nrsingadev for a Vaishnava. For Gaudiya, a worshiper of Krishna, we also worship Lord Nrsingadev, because he's especially keen on removing such obstacles. And, you know, mechanical bhakti isn't going to do very well with removing of anarthas. So it has to get to the bhakti stage. But wait a minute, bhakti is going to be blocked by those anarthas, yes. Therefore, tivra bhakti. That's the practical application part. Well, what if I'm not ready for Tivra Bhakti? Well, then you're going to be in this, Bhakti is block stage, because there are anarthas, the residual effects of past offense. It's not like, you're in jail and you just got to stay in jail. You can become freed by Tivra Bhakti. And be very careful to avoid offense. Here's another dimension to that. We need sadhu sangha, but in sadhu sangha there's a chance I can make some offense. And I'm in a box. I need sadhu sangha, but I may make some offense to get rid of the anarthas to offending of the Vaishnava. So we don't give up sadhu sangha. We don't give up our faith. We're prey to the Supreme. We get more into the descending mercy along with effort mode. That's bhakti. That's bhakti. We continue with our services.
Thank you. One more question.
Yeah.
Hearing the stories, and not the stories, the realities, what happened to Lord Indra, and making many mistakes, and somehow he goes to Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu forgives him, and then his life keeps going. So that means he has tendency to make mistakes are many. He was also a devotee of Lord.
Yes.
So I was thinking, what about ourselves again? We commit mistakes again and again and again, and we ask for the forgiveness. So that's a little bit bothering me.
You know the answer to that one. I mean, we don't follow that path. Indra is in the position of Indra because of two things. He has piety and devotion for Vishnu, but he also has big time material desires, and with that big time pride. That goes with the territory becoming Indra. So it's not a good idea to aspire to be Indra, because it's got the territory involved in it. So what about us? The application part is when you seek forgiveness, the best way of seeking forgiveness is not to do it again. That's the lesson from Jagai Madhai. The one condition that Lord Chaitanya gave is don't do it again. And they didn't. He said to the others, don't ever speak of them in their past activities. They're Vaishnavas. Speak to them. You're Vaishnavas. Don't ever do those bad things again. That's one thing I ask. And they didn't. And not only that, they did more than that. They served the Vaishnavas, and they were always repentant. So, repentance and continuing to serve in a humble mood. That's the path we take.
Only thing is, we are not there yet, so it's a process.
Yeah.
So even
welcome to the I'm not there yet club. I've been using that phrase during this visit. It's come up several times. He has a question up here, and then we'll go online.
Maharaj, I remember.
I think it's on.
There we go.
Maharaj,
Yeah.
I remember you stating that the Yamadutas were trying to take Ajamila's subtle body.
They weren't trying to save; they were trying to take.
Mm-hmm.
They had subtle ropes taking the subtle body to Yamaraj.
Yeah, so what's the difference between the subtle body and the soul?
Well, the subtle body is a subtle body, and the soul is a soul. I mean, its subtle body is a covering. Mind, intelligence, and false ego isn't the soul. Mind, intelligence, and false ego is the subtle body. It's a covering of the soul.
So what were the Yamadutas trying to do with the subtle body?
Take the subtle body, because within the subtle body is the subtle body and the soul, to the court of Yamaraj for judgment for his past sins.
So if you're going back to Godhead, will the fish...
The subtle body dissolves.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj.
All right. Online.
There are several questions from yesterday and day before yesterday's class. But today's question, there's one. Giribaradhari Prabhu is asking, what is the Vaishnava etiquette if Guru walks in when someone is performing deity service or performing rituals or someone is preaching?
Well, I've been repeating a story that turns out it's something that I heard that's not really what happened, Prabhupada's story. So that doesn't help. One should pay obeisances. There are certainly circumstances where one continues with the worship or the ritual. And there are circumstances when one may not know where the line is. Where the line is, I think a lot depends on circumstance. So it's hard to have a rigid line. What to do when depends on circumstance.
This is from Padmaja Mataji. Is the trajectory of each living entity predetermined?
No. There are tendencies, but tendencies can change.
Questions from yesterday, no, two sessions back. Snehavalli Mataji's questions. We discussed that Swayambhuva Manu went to Priyavrata to request him to rule the universe because Prachetas attained perfection and the reign of kings broke.
And King Prachinibari also did the same.
There were many generations between Uttanapada and Prachetas.
Yes.
I have two-part question. First one, Priyavrata left the kingdom during Uttanapada's reign to attain perfection.
Yes.
While he was gone, Dhruva, Uttanapada, Prachinibari and Prachetas all attained perfection, but Priyavrata didn't, even though he left the kingdom way before. Could you please elaborate how to understand this?
He had a long life. It's like Citraketu, No. Bharat living for such a long time? It's a good question. And the only thought I have, I mean, I also thought of the same question. He lived a long life, and he was one of those jivas that lived a long life. And the others, I mean, how long did Dhruva rule? Long time. And then lineage, so is Priyavrata lived for a long time. And was he at the stage of perfection? Yeah. But he was still alive. He didn't go back to Godhead. He was still on the planet, ready to be asked to rule. This has something to do with the duration of his lifetime.
The second question is, Lord Brahma gave boon to Priyavrata that he will not be attached to his wife. Parikshit Maharaj asked Shukadeva Goswami.
He would not remain attached. He would become, but he would be relieved of that attachment.
So then the question was about how Parikshit Maharaj asked Shukadeva Goswami, how Priyavrata was attached to his wife, even though he got the boon from Lord Brahma that he will not be attached.
It's not that he wouldn't be attached. He would be released from that attachment. He was attached.
There are 3 questions from Kirti Prabhu on the Vedic cosmology presentation.
Oh.
The video of planetary system showed 4 Kumaras in 2 realms.
Yes, he did. You're very observant.
So he just asks, are they same?
Yes.
And the second question is the Bhagavatam view of the universe a geocentric model?
Yes.
The sun seems to be moving around Jambudvipa in the illustration.
Yeah.
And the third question is, the moon seems to be above the sun.
Yes.
Can you please help me understand solar eclipse?
From a Vedic perspective, Rahu. And from a modern science perspective, it's shadows. That's it. How about you? You're happy? All right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.